Hello, welcome to the channel Y Stories. Enjoy watching.
To save her ailing mother, the daughter sang in a restaurant. But as soon as the city mayor entered the establishment and saw her dress, it's so hard to choose between studying and working sometimes, and sometimes life doesn't even give you a choice, and you have to learn and earn money from a young age. It's one thing if someone is driven by a bright goal, a dream, but what if everything happens out of despair and fragile hope? Marta stopped thinking about all this a year ago. She just forced herself to get up in the morning, go to college on autopilot, sit through classes, then return home, eat, change clothes, and run to work at the restaurant. Marta, my daughter, you're only 19 years old, live your life. Why are you wasting your youth and best years on an old, sick woman? Mom, I don't want to hear these questions anymore, the girl replied while hastily packing a simple snack for work. Don't talk nonsense. You need to study, fall in love, laugh, make friends, be happy, not waste yourself in this tavern until morning among drunks, Medina sighed, watching her daughter. Marta remained silent, just gently nudged the rocking chair where her mother sat with her knitting. The chair quietly creaked across the floor on its curved rockers. The conversation was standard and repeated regularly once or twice a week since Marta found this job. In the provincial town, no one particularly wanted to hire a full-time student with unfinished education. So, it was either becoming a waitress or a cleaner. Marta chose the lesser and more profitable of the two evils. Yes, she had to run around with plates a lot, endure guests' sharp criticisms, and argue with the administrator and chef. But in addition to her income from the shift, she often received good tips. Who knows, maybe Marta would have continued working as a waitress if one day the restaurant owner, an elderly Arab named Amir, hadn't heard her quietly singing by the sink while washing her hands. Girls like stars shine in the sky until morning, it's easy to fall in love with one forever, Marta sang the song carelessly and beautifully. The song had played in the car on the way to the restaurant and stuck in her head for the entire evening. My star, why did you hide your talent? Amir approached her from behind, clapping his hands loudly. Marta turned around, frightened and embarrassed, sure that no one would hear her singing in such a secluded corner, as usual. Since early childhood, she had been drawn to music, singing at all the celebrations in kindergarten and school, singing at the local community center until she graduated from high school, and singing at home whenever she had a free moment. Oh, Marta, you have such a voice, the stage cries for you, the neighbor ladies on the bench by the entrance praised her behind her back. The girl always thought she sang quietly. However, on the first floor, it was hard to hide such an activity. I've long said the restaurant needs live music. Amir put his arm around her shoulder and led her to the hall. And here we have a singing bird wasting away, it's not right. We'll set up a stage, put up a microphone, and you'll sing instead of serving brandy. Marta didn't even have time to object before her employer carried out all his plans within a few days. He personally met her at the staff entrance before her shift. Today, my star, you'll sing for us, and tomorrow you'll entertain the guests, he cheerfully informed the former waitress. However, Marta still had to remain a waitress, singing every day in the restaurant was tough, and she could lose her voice in the first month. So, live music performances were scheduled for Friday and Saturday. She received a good percentage from these performances. On other days, she continued to wear her waitress uniform, swiftly moving around the hall, stashing tips in the secret pocket of her shirt. Amir had no complaints about the singer's voice, but he did have concerns about her appearance. One day, the administrator gave her slightly more money for the shift. Marta looked up questioningly. It's a bonus from the management, said Laura, who looked like a fox, shaking her red mane, for outfits for performances. Go buy a couple of dresses or something. Marta lowered her eyes. Laura was 7 years older, but considered herself a star and wasn't shy with her words. I don't care, but Amir doesn't like the singer standing on stage in a worn-out skirt and a sweater with pills, Laura unnecessarily clarified, no longer looking at Marta. The girl took the money, thinking about how to get out of the delicate situation. What was so delicate? Marta worked not because she was a careerist or saving for an expensive dream, but almost all her earnings went to her mother's cancer treatment, and they lived on the modest leftovers. When Marta was 17, Medina started feeling unwell, and eventually, doctors discovered she had stage 2 kidney cancer. Naturally, she couldn't continue working with such a diagnosis, and the savings set aside for a rainy day were quickly spent on treatment and examinations. Her mother's illness forced Marta to grow up in a few months, harshly and without asking for permission. If I don't buy a dress for performances, there will be questions. If there are questions, they'll ask for the money back or ask me to work it off. If I buy a dress, Mom won't have enough for the doctor and medication until the end of the recently prescribed course, the girl muttered, sitting in the car and fingering the received bills. After the shift, at 2 to 3 a.m., the kind cook Elvira, who lived on the way but a bit further, would drive her home in her old Toyota. "What are you muttering, Marta?" She turned back to the passenger, pulling the handbrake. Counting tips, Marta quickly started gathering her things. "Thank you. See you tomorrow." She jumped out of the car, slammed the door, and waved goodbye again. The old Toyota responded with a snort of its engine and slowly drove its owner away. The fake smile disappeared from her face as soon as Marta entered the house. She approached her mother's bed, carefully listening to her breathing. Every time, Marta feared returning from work and not hearing it in the dark, the most precious sound of a loved one. She gently adjusted the blanket, turned off the nightlight above the bed, removed the book from her mother's hand, and tiptoed to the bathroom, then to her room to sleep. Tomorrow was Saturday, no classes, she could sleep a bit longer. However, sleep, though giving short rest to her body and mind, didn't solve the question that tortured Marta all the way home. "Why so glum? Did Amir offend you?" Noticing her daughter's tired look, Medina asked. "Well, it's hard to say," Marta replied, dividing the scrambled eggs on her plate with a fork. She shared her feelings with her mother. Medina was about to send her daughter to the store for outfits, but didn't even get a chance to speak. "Don't even say that you can spend money on tinsel for the stage," Marta pursed her lips. "Not in my case." "Oh," Medina shook her head and pondered. She understood the whole picture and would have felt the same way. What clothes, when you need to buy new medicine every month? But on the other hand, Medina supported her daughter's desire to sing and was glad that she wasn't burying her talent. Marta had already gone to culinary college against the call of her soul. A person who can cook will never be without money, although secretly the girl dreamed of becoming a vocal teacher someday. "You know, I think I have an idea." Medina adjusted her bangs and turned her head towards the old closet at the end of the hallway. Marta followed her gaze in confusion. "Mom, there's only old junk there, boots from the dacha, ski poles. Amir will either die laughing or kick me out of the restaurant in those rags." "Don't rush." Medina waved her hand and awkwardly got up from the stool. "There should be a green box on the top shelf, at the end. Look." Marta grabbed a stool, approached the closet, and began actively rummaging through the dusty but sometimes useful household stuff. Soon, the girl indeed found a green box. She brought it to the table, dusted it off, and looked questioningly at her mother. "Open it." "What are you looking at?" Medina smiled. Marta hesitantly lifted the lid. A white fabric adorned with scattered cornflowers came into view. A bit more, and she was holding a beautiful, slightly old-fashioned dress just below the knees. "Mom, where did this come from?" Marta asked with undisguised joy in her voice. "From my youth," Medina replied. "It's been lying in the closet, forgotten, for about 30 years. It's long been too small for me, but for you, it will be perfect and serve you well." Marta hugged her mother and then ran off to find the iron. The evening was saved. Outside the Jeep, oncoming cars, road signs, and the roadside flashed by. It was getting late. "Tell me, Frisco, why did I go to that factory today?" Senor Miguel asked his driver, yawning. "I still haven't figured it out. Judging by the way they pampered you there for half a day, for some important business," Frisco chuckled quietly into his mustache. I know they're important business, Senor Miguel grumbled. They only show you where there's new machinery and it's clean because it was scrubbed the day before. But take a step to the side, and it's a paradise for all inspections and checks, rotten stuff, cockroaches, and other filth. Maybe an anonymous tip-off and the matter will be closed? Frisco suggested cautiously, almost whispering. If I weren't tied by old friendship with the father of that rascal running the factory, I would have shut down this sausage shop long ago, Miguel waved dismissively. At that moment, Frisco's stomach growled loudly. Frisco awkwardly cleared his throat and shifted in the driver's seat. Frisco, do you want to retire early? Miguel smirked. The driver gave him a questioning look. How's that? Miguel wrinkled his nose. Working in unfavorable conditions, getting nervous, going hungry. After a few seconds, the deep laughter of the two men filled the car, and it would have been hard to see this friendly conversation as one between a boss and a subordinate, more specifically the mayor of the city and his personal driver. A few kilometers later, Miguel's stomach growled demandingly. Ah, damn those sausages, he swore. Frisco, stop the carriage somewhere, or we'll both retire early with gastritis. I know a restaurant, Frisco remembered. It's old-fashioned, but they cook wonderfully. It's about 20 minutes away. Oh, you'll ruin an important person, Miguel jokingly wagged his finger. My conscience won't forgive me for ruining my boss, commander, and friend in one, Frisco replied in the same tone. The men had spent the whole day on a business trip, barely eating anything except for coffee and a couple of buns. Naturally, their offended stomachs were growling, creating awkwardness. Though it was unlikely real awkwardness for two people who had known each other for over 30 years. Having met during their service, Frisco and Miguel had never parted. While one clearly had a business acumen and leadership qualities, the other led a quiet life and was content with what he earned. When Miguel became the mayor, he didn't even think about who to hire as his personal driver. He only trusted Frisco with his informal side and his life. An oncoming car's headlights flashed around a bend. The restaurant beyond was beautifully lit with string lights. The Jeep pulled into the parking lot. Through the tall windows, waitresses could be seen bustling inside. Oriental cuisine? Miguel surveyed the establishment. They cook curry better than in India, Frisco declared authoritatively, locking the car. Miguel straightened his jacket, and they walked inside. A businesslike red-haired hostess immediately approached them. Good evening, welcome. Do you have a reservation? Good evening. We'd like to sit somewhere quiet, Miguel replied, smiling at the girl. Laura gasped quietly, finally recognizing the city mayor, but quickly composed herself and led the men to a cozy table by the window. Tonight we have live music. It will be noisy in the main hall, but here no one will disturb you. However, if you need anything, call me, and we'll resolve any issue. She placed a bell with a button on the table, flashed another radiant smile, and disappeared. However, her place was immediately taken by an equally polite waitress. Frisco and Miguel quickly perused the menu and within a couple of minutes had placed their order. It's a nice little restaurant, the city head mused, glancing around. I've passed by, but never had the chance to stop in. My wife and I celebrated our anniversary here, Frisco replied. Well, let's see, let's explore, Miguel said, cracking his knuckles. The first dishes and drinks appeared on the table. Dinner had begun, and the restaurant was filling up. Workers bustled near the stage, checking the equipment, and a guy with a guitar appeared from somewhere. Dear guests, Laura surveyed the hall. Every Friday and Saturday in our restaurant you can not only enjoy the best Oriental cuisine in the city, but also live music performed by the talented, up-and-coming singer Marta. A girl appeared on stage and took the second microphone. Should we finish eating quickly and go? Yes, Miguel? Frisco asked, glancing at her, but there was no coherent answer. Miguel was attentively watching the young stranger on stage, who was already clapping along to Gloria Estefan's most famous song. Miguel couldn't take his eyes off her, following her movements, catching every sound. It was as if he saw a clear piece of the past on that stage. The white hem was adorned with blue cornflowers, and the pearly buttons sparkled in the stage lights. He would recognize it among 1,000 similar ones. Yes, his eyes weren't lying. It was the same dress he had given to his beloved girl 36 years ago before he left and lost her forever. Medina! Her mother shouted from the balcony, waving the phone receiver out the open window. Come quickly, Miguel is calling. Okay, coming. Medina hurriedly spread a sheet on the clothesline and clipped it with a couple of pegs. She grabbed an empty basin and ran home from the yard, skipping. Hello, she pressed the receiver to her ear, lying on the kitchen windowsill. Of course, I'll come. In the evening? What's the surprise? Okay, prankster, you don't have to tell me. Bye. Kisses. Medina placed the receiver on the hooks and sat on the chair next to it. She still couldn't catch her breath from the swift run to the 3rd floor. Where are you going again? Her mother appeared in the doorway with a watering can in her hand. Miguel invited me to his dacha this evening, Medina replied. He has some surprise for me. As soon as children turn 18, they try to escape from home under any pretext. Sometimes it's universities, discos, dachas, or boys. Her mother waved her hands with mock indignation. Medina laughed loudly. She loved her mother for her blunt humor and sharp phrases. And you can't help but pick up a few things at the factory. It's no place for princesses. However, Angelina tried to raise her daughter to be calm, refined, and graceful. But Medina still picked up a handful of signature phrases and a sense of humor from her. Coupled with her pretty appearance, she turned out to be the girl for any situation, as Angelina herself liked to say. You always look forward to the beginning of summer, and June always flies by as if it's in a hurry. That's how it happened in 1987. And time always goes faster for those in love. They notice nothing around them, living only for the desire to meet and miss each other with all their being. Miguel and Medina met a year ago in a store line. Medina unknowingly took someone's place. The man who returned started arguing with her, and Miguel intervened. You should be ashamed of arguing with a girl, my good man. He appeared before them as if by magic. And why do you care so much? You should mind your own business and stay quiet when your elders speak. The rude man glared at him. I was quiet while the elders spoke, Miguel smirked, giving the rude man a sharp, righteous look. But now I don't see any elders. He deliberately looked around, intentionally ignoring the stunned man. Medina stared at the guy curiously and giggled. The man turned red but moved aside. Miguel gently put his arm around Medina's shoulder and loudly declared, Comrades, don't be indifferent to rudeness. Today they are rude to you in line, tomorrow in the bus, and the day after tomorrow, you yourself will continue this shameful behavior. Medina realized that under the loud speech and the exclamations of the grandmothers in line, he was leading her to the exit and barely held back from laughing. Miguel continued to speak. The line started supporting him and buzzing about the man who had insulted the girl. Only this way, we, good citizens, will resist swearing and permissiveness. Miguel was backing out of the store, pushing Medina. She already felt that he was barely holding his voice and was also ready to burst out laughing. When they finally got outside and ran around the corner, they both burst into laughter. Well, you're quite the revolutionary leader, no less, Medina laughed loudly. Where did you get so skilled? My grandpa, when he gets drunk, loves to make speeches, at the right time or not, Miguel responded, holding his stomach. When they stopped laughing and were wiping their tears, they finally introduced themselves to each other. Oh, Medina exclaimed, I was sent for milk, but where will I get it now? Miguel started laughing again, clutching his side. Funny, I can't. Okay, I got you into this milk game, so I'll get you out, he said cheerfully when the laughter subsided. That day they walked until evening, attracting attention with their laughter more than once, scaring the birds in the bushes. The milk made it to the family table only at 11 o'clock, but Medina was the least worried about it. Miguel turned out to be 2 years older than the 17-year-old girl. He had already finished school and was in his first year at a technical institute. And she felt as if she had known him all her life. Their communication flowed easily and smoothly from the very first day. Soon it became clear that the young people were in love, not just friends. Angelina initially tried to prevent these meetings, but when the stubborn and in-love Miguel spent the whole night at their apartment door out of principle, just because Angelina cut off the conversation with him by closing the door, the woman gave up. "If I don't let him in, he'll take you away himself," she said in response to her daughter's joyful look. Contrary to Angelina's fears, Medina didn't neglect her studies in her final school year because of love. On the contrary, she improved her grades and caught up on her backlog. It turned out that this was also Miguel's influence. "Study to get into where your heart desires, not where you end up," he repeatedly told the girl. "Do you think I'm happy to become a technician? I want to serve people, do something for my country, study history, law, not fix tractors." "And isn't that serving people?" Medina asked, head bent over her books. Miguel sighed wearily. This happened very rarely. Mostly, the young man was always in a cheerful, spirited, and noticeably mischievous mood. Everyone wants to serve people in their own way. He twirled a pencil in his hands, sitting next to her at the table. Some build ships, while others navigate them. Switch their places, and nothing good will come of it. Everyone has their own place and task in life. Doing someone else's work, you're not serving but languishing, or worse, ruining what others create. Medina listened intently. These conversations repeated periodically. "So, you plan to relax at the summer house until night?" her mother asked, turning on the tap to fill the watering can. "Is there a phone there at least?" "The neighbor has one." "I'll call from her place when I arrive." Medina nodded and fluttered into the bathroom to finish washing the clothes, feeling pleasantly languid. Medina knew the road to the summer house perfectly well, having secretly visited it several times without her mother's knowledge. Nearby, a forest loomed, a river flowed, and several other summer houses with greenhouses, apple trees, and decorative fences were scattered around. Before reaching the desired house, she saw friends and acquaintances in the yard. The guys were grilling sausages and vegetables over the fire. Someone was playing badminton, familiar tunes echoed from a cassette player. Miguel ran out of the house to greet her, hugging her tightly. "So, what's the occasion?" Medina asked curiously, greeting the other partygoers. "Do we need a reason to gather with friends?" Miguel responded immediately. Medina smiled and suddenly remembered. "Oh, I need to call Tiara, the neighbor, so Mom doesn't worry." She hurriedly left her bag on the porch and rushed to the neighbor. "You didn't tell her, right?" Miguel's best friend, Tomas, asked, watching the girl's back. "No, I didn't." Miguel's smile disappeared for a moment. "It's better if she doesn't know and doesn't worry in case something happens." "Stop with it in case something happens." Tomas confidently patted him on the shoulder. When Medina returned, Miguel met her, hiding his hands behind his back. The girl playfully tried to peek behind him, but he skillfully dodged her attempts and laughed. "What do you have there?" "Show me," she demanded playfully when the game dragged on. Miguel beckoned his beloved to the veranda of the summer house and finally pulled out a green box with a thin ribbon from behind his back. "I didn't know if you would like it or not, but I really wanted to give it to you," he said, handing the gift to Medina. The girl opened the box, sitting on an old creaky chair by the wall. Inside, she saw white fabric with scattered blue cornflowers, lifted it up, and realized she was holding a light summer dress below the knee with puff sleeves and lacing at the back. "It's so beautiful," she looked at Miguel with admiration. "Thank you. I really like it." "Put it on today," the guy requested. Instead of answering, Medina nodded, hugged him around the neck, kissed his cheek, and then darted into the coolness of the summer house's hallway with the box. The whole evening, the friends had fun, sang songs with a guitar, and almost at night, they sat on the porch under a lantern, wrapped in blankets, and told scary stories like they used to at camp as kids. Medina smelled the warm coals, the river, the pine trees, heard the moths hitting the lantern, felt Miguel gently squeezing her hand, and the soft fabric of the dress flowing over her body like moonlight over the calm surface of a small pond. Maybe this is happiness, the girl thought fleetingly, snuggling closer to the warm Miguel. They fell asleep together after midnight on the old bed to the sound of crickets and the rustling of leaves. And this sleep was so deep and serene, as if some higher forces were guarding it. In the morning, Medina did not find Miguel in the house, and friends only briefly mentioned that he had left very early. From that day on, Medina never saw her beloved again. She couldn't get the truth from anyone, cried buckets of tears in helpless confusion. Did he leave her? Disappear? Betray? For what? Why? The questions tormented her, plagued her with the unknown. Maybe something happened to him? But why is no one doing anything, and why are her questions persistently ignored by everyone, friends, Miguel's parents, and everyone slightly involved in the story? Angelina saw how her daughter was suffering and didn't know what to do. She didn't understand what had happened either, tried to comfort her, but how can an ordinary person deal with a broken heart? Such wounds can only be healed by time. Miguel, you look like you've seen a ghost. Frisco cautiously waved his hand in front of the mayor's eyes. Maybe I did, Miguel muttered. His face froze in concentrated amazement, looking at the young singer as if the man was searching for something familiar but long forgotten in her. Several more songs were performed in the restaurant, and then the young artist thanked the audience and rushed off the stage for a short break. Only the blue cornflowers on her dress flickered brightly in the stage lighting. A guy with a guitar took her place and began playing a familiar modern tune. Miguel sat unable to get up and leave the restaurant, even though they had long paid the bill and were just sipping tea from a clear teapot. Marta alternated between singing and taking short breaks off stage. Someone from the guests gave her a small bouquet. The girl beamed at the giver. Accepting flowers from strangers, but not from me, her hand was caught by someone's firm fingers in the hallway by the wardrobe where she had gone to rest. I don't want them and won't take them, she jerked her hand but couldn't break free. Angry brown eyes stared at her from the dimness of the hallway arch. 10 years ago, you would have sat quietly in my car. The man in a black t-shirt with a pronounced scar through his right eyebrow smiled unpleasantly. It hurts. Let go, Marta pulled again, but the hand was held firmly. Why are you playing hard to get, fool? You're not a child anymore, you know that grown men don't let go just like that, the offender sneered and pulled Marta closer. The smell of strong tobacco and cognac hit her nostrils. Grown men should know better than to hurt the young, an unfamiliar voice sounded from behind the offender. The man in the black t-shirt turned around. You should leave, Mr. Mayor, he snarled, seeing the new guest in the hallway. Want more trouble for your reputation? Marta heard her own heart pounding, resonating in her temples like the flutter of a frightened bird. What's going on here, Tobias? Amir's resonant voice with an accent filled the hallway, attracting attention. Let the singer go immediately. Behave yourself in my restaurant, or get out. Tobias didn't argue with the owner. He released Marta's hand, glared at everyone, grabbed his jacket from the wardrobe stand, and stormed out, slamming the door. Senor Miguel, Amir turned to the newcomer with an oily smile, thousands of apologies. This jackal's son won't step foot here again. I hope this misunderstanding won't leave a black mark on my restaurant. It won't, the man straightened his jacket, but you should hire security. For your staff. He emphasized the last word meaningfully. The elderly Arab promised the mayor that everything would be done perfectly, then loudly ordered the kitchen to pack several expensive dishes for the guest as an apology. Only the singer and her sudden protector remained in the dim hallway. Thank you for stepping in, Marta cautiously thanked him, and you are. I didn't mishear, did I? You're welcome, the man smiled. And yes, you didn't mishear. I'm Miguel Baez, and what's your name? The girl awkwardly looked down. She knew the city had a mayor but never tried to remember his face. Marta, the singer, introduced herself. Miguel examined her closely again, unintentionally looking for familiar features in her appearance, and it seemed he found them. "Tell me, by any chance, is your mother's name Medina?" Miguel asked, lowering his voice. "Yes," Marta nodded, surprised, "but how do you know?" "Many years ago, I gave a beautiful girl a dress exactly like the one you're wearing now," Miguel sighed with a certain sadness, "and I'm pretty sure that girl was your mother, Marta. I asked for your permission to just talk to her. If she wants to, of course." He pulled a wallet out of the inner pocket of his jacket and handed Marta a business card. "If she wants, please call me." Another man in a black suit with a mustache came out of the hall. He was holding 2 large bags with apologies from the owner of the establishment. "Senor Miguel, is everything all right?" the man asked with restrained concern. The mayor nodded and asked the cloakroom attendant for his coat. "I must go. Official business." "I'm glad we met," Miguel smiled at her while putting on his coat. "You are a very talented girl. Don't stop singing under any circumstances. You have a God-given talent. Have a good evening." "Goodbye," Marta said, watching her sudden protector leave. She was left holding the simple business card of this easygoing, pleasant, and somewhat fatherly warm man. The sound of high heels echoed sharply off the glass showcases and walls of stores on the main street. The pointed toes of the shoes confidently carried their owner forward along the sidewalk. A black car slowed down parallel to her on the road. A thin brunette in a red pantsuit and a white coat with a pixie cut was reflected in the tinted glass. "Miss, does your mother need a son-in-law?" The window rolled down, and a man with a short haircut and a scar through his right eyebrow leaned out lazily, resting his elbow on the door. "Very funny, Cazador," the lady replied without a single muscle twitching on her face and without turning her head. "Teodora, you could play along just once," the man grumbled, offended. "Maybe I want to feel young again?" "Well, go to kindergarten then," the lady cut him off coldly. "Are you entertaining me in the city center for business or just passing by?" "Maybe I missed you?" Tobias cajoled but then frowned and composed himself. "Actually, it's about business." "Fine, let's talk." Teodora stopped. The passenger door closed, and the car merged into the traffic flow. "Your husband went to Amir's for dinner last night," Tobias began, "got in the way when I was wooing the local singer. Peacemaker in a suit, really. And why would he defend some poor girl who works as a weekend singer in that shabby joint?" Teodora stared ahead without blinking. "Who knows?" Tobias shrugged, but then I noticed from the car that he gave her his business card. Have you ever seen the mayor hand out his contact information to just anyone, let alone cleaning ladies? "My husband is a kind soul, but even he wouldn't do something that foolish," Teodora drawled. "Who is she anyway?" "Do you know?" "A poor student, lives with her mother on Calle Mar Negro," Tobias cheerfully spilled the details. "No father or brothers, and she has a bit of a temper." "Ah, I like such women, you know." Teodora glanced at him from under her thick black eyebrows. "Of course, she's no comparison to you," Tobias quickly caught himself dreaming. "You're a goddess. I'll find out about this family of abandoned women, and you keep an eye on Miguel this week. In case he sneaks off to see your singer." Teodora suddenly turned and deftly patted the stunned Tobias on the cheek with her fingers. "Only I can have secrets." Tobias beamed like a dog finally given a desired bone. The car stopped at the parking lot of a large building with columns. Teodora's heels clicked on the asphalt again as she sent Cazador an air kiss and disappeared through the doors. "What a woman!" "I'd sell my soul," Tobias muttered, watching her go. Marta sat at home on Sunday, her only day off. She was afraid to tell her mother about what happened and decided to think it over. What connections could the mayor of the city have with her mother, who had worked most of her life as a seamstress in a textile factory? According to Miguel, it happened a long time ago. But why didn't she know about this story? Marta looked at her mother, who was rocking in a chair and carefully knitting stitches on her needles. She had to start with the dress because it must have been the reason for the conversation, even though it happened under inconvenient circumstances. Your dress caused a sensation at the restaurant yesterday. Marta sat down on the creaky couch next to her. I knew it would, Medina said warmly, without taking her eyes off the knitting. It's a special dress. Yeah, Marta nodded cautiously, so special that the mayor himself recognized me in it and seems to have mistaken me for you. The knitting needles in Medina's hand stopped clicking and froze. Mom, don't get nervous. Marta dashed to the table with the medicine, where the sedative stood. I just want to know what all this means. Medina took the glass of valerian from her daughter and took a deep breath. She told her about how she met Miguel and received the dress as a gift just before he disappeared. After a year, I accepted it. After 2, I almost stopped feeling sad. After 5 years, I realized it was time to forget this story and put everything that connected us in the farthest drawer. Medina wiped a tear from her cheek with a fluffy shawl. I studied, started working, met your father, moved. In the chaos of the 90s, every day was a surprise. There was no time to suffer over first love. Then you came along, and everything became clear. Marta was silent. Did father know? She asked after a while. Of course not, Medina shook her head. Leon was an honest worker, and your grandmother Angelina convinced me that life with him would be calm. I gave in and agreed. What else could I do? Yes, grandmother was always a realist, Marta awkwardly agreed. Simultaneously, she glanced at the cabinet where a photo of her father in a frame stood. He died when she was 8 years old. In a dark alley, the man was stabbed for some small change. Some thug. The police found and imprisoned him, but Leon could not be brought back. Medina began to work a lot after his death to support herself and her daughter. Marta suspected that this is how her mother ruined her health. Struggling to hide her sadness and pain behind the sewing machine, Medina forgot that life could bring joy too. He gave me this at the restaurant. Marta handed her mother Miguel's business card, asked if he could talk to you. Medina touched the embossed white cardboard. It felt slightly warm, as if a spark from a June evening had touched her fingers. The surname is different, Medina whispered. But no one but him could recognize the dress, Marta whispered back. Medina took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and looked deep inside herself, seeing a meadow where a hesitant cornflower bloomed at the edge. All right, she turned to her daughter, tell him I agree to talk. Miguel took a deep breath and placed his hand on his chest. A bouquet of blue roses lay on his lap. I chose the freshest ones, Miguel, Frisco said confidently, noticing his boss in the rearview mirror. There were no better blue flowers. I should have gone alone. I would have pulled myself together faster, Miguel complained, feeling his heart pounding. You wouldn't have gone alone, Miguel. Frisco turned from the busy street into a narrow alley. I'm not just a driver, but also a friend and somewhat of a bodyguard. Frisco, you know I went through the same training and can defend myself if needed, the city head frowned. Caution never hurt anyone. Frisco calmly tapped his jacket, where a holstered gun rested under his arm. The car stopped at the needed address, as politely announced by the navigator. I'll stay on watch. The apartment windows are visible, Frisco said, turning off the engine. I'm sure there's no danger waiting for me there, Miguel replied confidently, took the bouquet, and opened the door. The entryway echoed with the sound of footsteps on the old stairs and the smell of freshly cleaned concrete floors. The doorbell rang in the apartment. Marta ran to the peephole. She had wisely taken a break from her classes to stay home and be a support group. Medina was very nervous, but didn't know what she was more nervous about, the visit of the official or the real chance to meet a long-forgotten past. Hello, come in quickly, Marta hurried the high-ranking guest as if he were some kind of boy. Come on, Mom is waiting in the room. Miguel took the bouquet and carefully followed the girl down the narrow, long corridor. He had seen and done a lot in his career, but he hadn't been this nervous in a long time. The room was bright. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains onto the carpet and walls, played on the pendant of an old-fashioned chandelier, and glided over the polished handles of the rocking chair. Mom, this is Miguel, Marta introduced the guest, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Medina stood by the table in a decent dress and stared in amazement at the man who entered. "And this is my mother, Medina," Marta began. "Medina Herrero," Miguel finished. They looked at each other as if a ghost suddenly resurrected from oblivion. The way one looks at a sunset, the way one looks at the first long-awaited flowers in spring. Marta inadvertently sensed the special importance of the moment and quietly stepped out of the room. She would be nearby, but very carefully. Medina both recognized and didn't recognize Miguel. But he recognized her immediately. "You can't find cornflowers in November, although I visited all the flower shops," Miguel said with a barely noticeable smile, approaching her quietly and handing her a bouquet of blue roses. Medina took it with one hand and then, unable to hold back, hugged the man tightly, soaking the collar of his jacket with tears. Frisco was reading a book in the car, periodically looking at the windows of the apartment where a melodrama was unfolding that famous playwrights would envy. Marta peeked into the room with a vase in her hands after 20 minutes and found her mother and Miguel sitting on the couch. He was tenderly holding her hand in his. "I was tormented by the shame of what I did in '87. I was expelled from technical school, and justifiably so. It wasn't my thing, I admit." "And what do they do with expelled male students?" "Yes, they draft them into the army," Miguel recounted. Marta involuntarily listened, but didn't dare enter the room. She stood by the entrance with a vase in her hands. "I would have waited for you, as long as it took," Medina quietly replied, not removing her hand. "I know. Do you remember what happened then?" Miguel looked her straight in the eye. "I knew, felt it in my bones, that I wouldn't just be drafted but sent to Afghanistan. I was already heading to the unit and knew it. How? I have no idea. But that's what happened. 6 months later, we were transferred." Medina felt goosebumps on her neck and looked at the barely noticeable scar on Miguel's forehead, which he skillfully hid with his haircut. "Yes, it's a reminder," he said, following her gaze. "Over there, every day is like the last. You don't know if you'll eat in the evening, and you don't remember when you last slept properly. A year there flew by like a lifetime. I was wounded many times, but not seriously, rose to the rank of senior sergeant, and a month before the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, we were ambushed. The convoy was shot up. I was stunned. I woke up in the hospital with 2 leg wounds, a stitched head, and a mangled face. I almost didn't remember anything, who I was, where I was. Our guys, who were nearby, picked me up." Miguel sighed heavily. Medina listened to him, catching and fearing every word. Marta also listened to the storyteller, hugging the vase in the corridor. The documents were left in that vehicle. Almost without memory, wounded, anonymous, I stayed in the border areas with Afghanistan. I don't even want to talk about how I recovered and made my way back. By the time I got home, my relatives and friends had already buried me. Then I learned to live again, restored my documents, but decided to bury my old surname with that cursed war. A close comrade of mine died on the day of the attack. He said he was the only son in the family, and if he died, the surname wouldn't be passed on. I paid tribute to him by becoming Baez. But why didn't you find me? Why didn't you tell me you were alive and well?" Medina asked plaintively, almost in a whisper. "I couldn't. I did terribly by leaving you. I thought I would spare you the pain of loss. Shame was my constant companion when my memory returned, and my face healed somewhat. Shame pushed me to my career. I probably wanted to apologize to you silently by doing what I had to at my post. And when I saw your daughter in the restaurant in that dress, shame consumed me, burned me. I seemed to wake up from my own deception." Miguel unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, which was pressing on his throat. "I understand that I have no right to claim anything or ask for forgiveness, but I am ready to do whatever it takes to simply know that you are alive and well." Medina lowered her head, and suddenly tears streamed from her eyes. She buried her face in Miguel's chest. He instinctively hugged the woman. "Mom has cancer," Marta said slowly, appearing in the doorway. "We've been fighting the disease for 2 years now." "What?" Miguel pushed the crying Medina away and looked at her face. "We'll cure you, do you hear? I'll do everything I can and even can't. I just found you not to lose you again." When the emotion subsided and the roses were finally placed in water, Marta guessed to bring a tray of tea into the room. When Miguel finally went back to the car, it was already getting dark outside. Frisco was calmly finishing his dime novel and sipping coffee from a thermos. Miguel told Medina everything that happened after Afghanistan, how he studied history, moved to this city, got involved with crime, started a business, and eventually ended up where he wanted, in management. He also told her he married in the turbulent 90s out of foolishness and then didn't want to stain his reputation with a divorce. He hugged her tightly goodbye, barely holding back tears of either joy or redeemed shame. "That's how life is, Frisco," Miguel said, getting into the car. "You just find happiness, and you can lose it again." The door slammed shut, and the Jeep, growling softly, drove away. As soon as the mayor's car had moved 2 houses away, a low black car emerged from the alley between the garages and the yard. The window rolled down. Teodoro would be very interested to know that the mayor of the city was making individual visits to some slums. Cazador lit his cigarette with satisfaction. A few days passed. Marta noticed that her mother was blossoming. She had started deliberately looking for local news on television just to catch a glimpse of Miguel. Previously, Medina hardly ever watched TV and had no idea what was happening in the authorities or who was in charge. Marta was happy to see her mother sitting by the window, tenderly embroidering a cornflower bouquet and quietly humming something with her lips. The girl hadn't seen her so joyful, elated, and smiling for a long time. Miguel sometimes called, but the conversations were short. Everyone understood that a prominent city figure could be busy. One day, Marta, leaving the apartment, ran into Miguel's familiar mustached companion at the entrance. He handed her a huge basket of various fruits, bowed, and drove away. Marta found a note in the basket but prudently didn't read it out of respect for her mother. She simply brought the gift into the apartment with ceremony and, grabbing a couple of apples from it, hurried to work. Marta hadn't yet figured out her feelings toward Miguel, but they were definitely warm and respectful. How could it be otherwise when this man made her mother happier and had defended her from a bully in the restaurant? Marta also remembered the mayor's promise to help with treatment. It warmed her soul. But she understood that one couldn't live on hope alone, so she continued to go to the restaurant every day except Sunday and sing. Grandma Angelina used to tell her little granddaughter. And Marta understood well what her frugal and thrifty grandmother meant. On her way to work, Marta had an unpleasant encounter. She was walking on the sidewalk with her headphones on, contemplating the passers-by and lost in her thoughts. Due to the loud music, she didn't immediately notice that a silver foreign car had blocked her way at the pedestrian crossing. Marta absently glanced at the traffic light, where the green man was rhythmically moving. She hadn't made a mistake, it was the right time to cross, but the car was parked right on the zebra crossing, as if on purpose. Marta shrugged and tried to go around the car, but it suddenly lunged forward aggressively, blocking her path again. "Hey, what's the big idea?" the girl exclaimed, pulling out an earphone and angrily glaring at the driver through the tinted windshield. The hazard lights on the car turned on. The driver's window began to roll down. "Hello, darling," came a mocking female voice from inside. "So this is what the restaurant singer looks like." Marta suppressed the invisible grip tightening around her throat. "Let me through, I'm in a hurry," she raised her voice. "No need to hurry. If the restaurant guests miss a couple of your songs, they'll only be better off," came another taunt from the car. "Now you will turn right, go down to the parking lot, and we will have a talk there." "Go to hell," Marta snapped. "What's next? Should I dance for you?" She irritably kicked the front bumper of the car. A woman with short black hair and sunglasses stuck her head out of the window. "Listen, you brat, I'm not used to repeating myself. Or should I ask your sick mommy to take you to the parking lot by the hand?" Marta froze. This rude woman behind the wheel knew too much. Who knows what else she might know and how she could use it if the altercation continued. The girl slowly stepped back, returned to the sidewalk, turned right, and slowly walked down the alley. The car followed. Marta could see it from the corner of her eye. 100 meters, 50, 20. She stopped. The car sharply turned into the first parking spot. A woman in a green business suit and black high-heeled pumps got out of the car. The stranger approached Marta, took off her dark glasses slowly, and gave her a disgusted look, as one would look at a beggar in an underpass. "So, darling," Teodora slowly folded the glasses, "today you will tell your mommy that the meeting with the mayor was just a dream, and you will continue living as you did before, dragging yourself to your dull school where they teach you to cook soup, running to your job at the karaoke canteen, and never sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Got it? And why should I listen to a rich, rude woman like you?" Marta retorted boldly, though her heart was pounding wildly in her chest. Teodora narrowed her eyes unpleasantly. "Well, you don't want your sick mommy to suddenly have a heart attack, or maybe for the young singer to get hit by a car on her way from work. Completely by accident, of course. So many unfair accidents happen in our world." Teodora mockingly brushed away a non-existent tear from her eyelashes. "And believe me, I'll make sure that no one investigates these accidents." Marta remained silent, holding back her emotions, though a storm was raging inside her. Teodora gave her a triumphant look. "Well, it's good that you're such a smart little fool." She opened the car door, "but I won't let rudeness slide. So, see you later, darling." The car's engine rhythmically growled, and soon it disappeared around the corner. Only when her tormentor was gone did Marta let tears fill her eyes. She sniffed, trying in her helpless rage to find a pack of dry tissues in her bag. It was indeed silly to believe that some mythical wizard would come and solve all the problems. Miracles don't just happen in life, and everything comes at a price. Hopefully, the price is only money. Marta hurriedly wiped her burning face with her sleeve, having failed to find tissues in her bag. She feared not the threats of the unfamiliar woman, but having to take away her mother's newfound hope for recovery, and maybe something else, the good that had revived her desire to live. The girl walked down the street, her head bowed in helpless anger. She blamed herself for her naivety and belief in the impossible, for that idiotic evening at the restaurant, and even for the notorious dress with cornflowers, as it was the key that had brought their small, poor family together with the city's first man. The next day, the girls' classes at college were canceled, so she stayed home until evening. Marta decided not to show her mother what had happened, although she was tormented by what she had to do. To avoid sitting in idle boredom, she decided to cook lunch, but there weren't enough ingredients in the fridge for the planned dish. Marta peeked into her mother's room, took a bag from a small hook on the wall, put on her jacket, and slipped out of the apartment. Outside, there was no wind, and a light fog lazily crept through the streets, enveloping houses, trees, and roads in its damp embrace. Admiring this gloomy beauty, Marta didn't even notice the unfamiliar car at the driveway as she returned with a bag full of groceries. "Good afternoon," greeted Frisco. "Hello," Marta replied belatedly, glancing at the car. Frisco opened the back door for her. Marta hesitantly climbed inside and saw Miguel. "I wanted to come to you this evening, but honestly, I couldn't wait," the mayor said after greeting her. There was joyful impatience in his voice. Marta looked questioningly at him and then at Frisco, who stood outside, calmly observing the yard. "I recently arranged for a wonderful oncologist in the capital to see your mother this week. He's ready to prescribe the most modern medications and perform surgery if necessary. Frisco will take you to the airport," Miguel assured her warmly. Inside, Marta was filled with a wave of gratitude and hope, but she suppressed these feelings, remembering the threat from the woman in the green suit. Who was she? A wife? A lover? Should she tell the mayor what had happened? What if she put herself and her mother in even greater danger? The games of powerful people can be ruthless, especially towards those who are poorer and more defenseless. "You know, thank you for your efforts, really, but it wasn't necessary," Marta forced out. Miguel's eyebrows shot up. I don't think I'm old enough to suffer from auditory hallucinations. What happened? He looked at her in confusion. Marta awkwardly crumpled the shopping bag in her hands, feeling the onion peel betrayingly falling on the perfectly clean car mat under her feet. You better stop coming here, and stop calling my mother too, she said quietly but firmly. You're just reopening old wounds for both of you. Surely you have enough to do in your position, and we'll manage on our own. I'll manage without outside help. Thank you for stepping in back then, and that's it. We're too different. Let's say goodbye. Goodbye, Miguel. Marta yanked the car handle and jumped out onto the street, barely holding back her emotions. It felt like every word she spoke burned her throat like hot coals. She hurried into the entrance of the building under Frisco's surprised gaze and Miguel's bewildered one. No one knew how much effort it took for Marta to do this, driven by fear and love simultaneously. Later at home, Medina entered the kitchen where Marta was cutting onions for the sauté. The woman noticed her daughter's tear-streaked face. Did you buy a mean onion? Look at those tears. Yes, very sharp, Marta quickly agreed, glad her mother didn't understand. Really fresh. You should cut it in water, then it won't sting your eyes, Medina advised. I'll cook something this evening too. Maybe Miguel will come over. I want to treat him to my mushroom cutlets, she said dreamily, tossing her hair back and straightening up. Because of the first chemotherapy a year ago, Medina's hair had thinned considerably and was now growing unevenly. But she had learned to style it so that no one could guess about her illness. Marta didn't have the strength to dissuade her mother from her dreams, especially after what she had told Miguel an hour earlier. Life began to return to its old course, though not everyone understood this. Miguel really did stop calling. Marta felt ashamed in front of him and ignorant towards her mother, who continued to wait for calls and embroider cornflowers. She repeatedly told the story of their acquaintance and various sweet moments, looking hopefully out the window at the setting sun. 5 days passed this way. Maybe he's very busy, Medina once said, with barely perceptible sadness. Probably, Marta agreed reluctantly. He's a man with a tight schedule and many obligations. To avoid the bitterness of her contradictory act tearing at her soul, Marta buried herself in work and studies. At home, she preferred to do all the housework rather than sit idle and delve into the depths of agonizing self-reflection. Before each performance, her hand would reach for her mother's old dress, but her conscience wouldn't let her wear it. Instead, after much persuasion, she borrowed old prom dresses from her friends in the group. Medina quickly tidied them up. They were more than sufficient for evenings behind the microphone. That evening, Marta packed a long green dress in a garment bag, gathered some snacks, and hurried to the restaurant for her Saturday shift. These nights usually brought the most profit. You're almost late, Laura greeted the breathless Marta at the service entrance. Quick, change and get to the hall. Tonight we're almost fully booked, 80% of the tables are reserved. Got it, Marta replied, slipping past the administrator into the locker room. On Fridays and Saturdays, Marta arrived at 4 p.m. and served tables until 9:30. Then, she had half an hour to freshen up, change, and come out to the guests as a singer. That evening, there were indeed many guests, and closer to 10, the largest reserved table for a big group started to fill up. Marta rushed towards it with a notepad and pencil, but her colleague Dita stopped her. You'll be on stage soon. Let me take them. You handle my two-seater. Marta nodded with relief and hurried to check out the departing guests, then quickly went to the locker room to get ready. Soon, she emerged from the service area doors, holding the long hem of her dress. Her eyes habitually scanned the hall, assessing the mood of the audience. Suddenly, she spotted a painfully familiar face in the crowd. Well, why are you standing there? Laura hissed behind her. Get on stage, everything's set up already. And Marta froze just a few steps away from her. From the large table, sitting surrounded by a cheerful company, Teodora looked at her mockingly with a glass of champagne in hand. This is a nice restaurant, cozy, and the food is excellent. Why not celebrate a birthday here? Carissa was saying in the taxi. People usually don't celebrate turning 40, Teodora remarked. Oh, I don't believe in those silly things, Carissa grimaced. And by the way, who flew to Italy 4 years ago, huh? That's different, Teodora evaded. Are all the others already there? Yes, the girls from the tax office, our businesswoman Savannah with Julio, and Ramon. He said he booked the biggest table, Carissa replied. And Miguel won't be coming again? He doesn't like gatherings, Teodora snorted. Probably thinks it's unbecoming for a mayor to relax in a restaurant with his wife. But he's not averse to doing it with Frisco, the woman thought to herself. At least you'll have a good time without him, Teodora winked at the birthday girl. Hasn't Cazador been courting you for about 3 years now? Oh, please, Teodora grimaced. He's only good for being a messenger or an eavesdropper. You're cruel, Teodora, Carissa smirked. You keep stringing him along. The guy's in love, brings you flowers, buys you expensive shoes. Oh, you. Well, let him bring them, Teodora replied condescendingly. I'm a judge. He's a shady type with a not-so-clean past. If he were smarter, he would have found himself a girl of his own standing by now. The taxi pulled up to the restaurant. The women paid and, wrapping themselves in their coats, got out. Teodora suddenly looked around the place and struck a pose. Carissa, why didn't you tell me the name of the place right away? She asked her friend. Oh, I keep forgetting these Oriental names, Carissa waved her hand. Why? Just because, Teodora smiled unpleasantly. There's a singer here. I think she'll be perfect for Cazador. Carissa straightened the hem of her dress, and the two women, laughing, disappeared into the restaurant's doors. The restaurant was full of guests. Amir himself came out and greeted several of them personally. The waitresses bustled back and forth nonstop, filling the tables with drinks and dishes. All the colors of life in the feast were perfectly visible from the stage. On other days, Marta didn't pay attention to it and just sang, imagining herself at a concert as a star with thousands of fans. It warmed her soul, but today she sang with effort, tense. Her movements were not as light and artistic as usual, and her voice trembled where it had never failed before. In the hall sat a woman who terrified Marta. Her mind buzzed with thoughts like a swarm of angry bees. Why did she come? What does she want from me now? Maybe it's a coincidence? Should I not overthink it? Through the hall, Marta saw that the large table first called for Laura, and when the administrator left, the elderly owner of the restaurant approached the table himself. Amir leaned towards Teodora and her blonde companion. The longer they talked, the gloomier the Arab's face became. The music ended. Marta put down the microphone, took a bow, and went for a 10-minute break. At the bar counter, she ran into an angry Amir. My little star, what happened today? You're not singing, you're bleeding from the stage. Important guests have complained about you, he said emotionally, mingling the words with his accent. Sorry, I think I caught a cold yesterday, Marta lowered her eyes. She wouldn't say the real reason. Ardak. Amir called the bartender. Make my star 50 grams of brandy. Marta barely had time to react before a shot of the strong drink with a piece of lemon appeared in front of her on the counter. That's the only way I treat colds, Amir looked expectantly at the girl. Drink up and get back to work. There was nothing else to do. The lie required confirmation. Marta raised the shot, closed her eyes, and knocked it back in one swift motion. The brandy burned her insides and spread warmly through her chest. Let me make you some herbal tea with honey for after your shift, kind Ardak suggested sympathetically, watching Marta grimace as she chewed the lemon slice. It'll be better for your throat. The girl exhaled, leaning her hands on the counter, and shook her head. The brandy was affecting her gradually. Drinking on the job was strictly forbidden, only allowed with the owner's permission, and considering that Marta was always busy and had never really tried strong drinks, even 50 grams had an effect. The break time was over, and it was time to get back to work. Marta felt her cheeks burn, either from the drink or the mix of emotions inside. She quickly darted to the mirror near the ladies' room and, to her horror, found herself face to face with Teodora. "Hello, darling," the woman greeted her mockingly from under her tousled bangs. "I told you we'd meet again." Marta froze at the sink, her temples throbbing. "You're unusually quiet today," Teodora feigned surprise, adjusting her hair in the mirror, "and you're probably lip-syncing, right?" "I fulfilled the condition." "What more do you want from me?" The brandy gave Marta sudden courage. "Heard the owner calls you his little star?" Teodora ignored the question. "And stars sometimes fall very quickly." She snapped her powder compact shut and crookedly curled the corner of her mouth. Marta realized she had no more time and needed to get back on stage. She turned, took a step away, and suddenly heard the sound of ripping fabric. "Has the little star lost her tail?" Teodora mockingly removed the pin from the train of the singer's stage dress. Marta barely held back the anger and tears that threatened to burst forth. She cast a glance full of sudden hatred at the haughty rich woman, gathered the trailing edge of her dress, and hurried onto the stage. Singing in such a state was even worse than before. She missed notes, swallowed words, lost rhythm, and even her constant performance companion, guitarist Andres, looked at Marta in bewilderment. The first sounds of dissatisfaction arose from the audience. Marta could already see Laura shrugging apologetically at Amir and gesturing toward her with an open hand. "Put on the radio and get rid of the singer," came a shout from the far table. "Yeah, what is this mess?" immediately echoed from another table. "And you charge a higher reservation fee for such live music?" a third table protested. Amir, red with anger and shame, pushed Laura onto the stage. She hurriedly took the microphone from Marta's hands. "Dear guests, we sincerely apologize for the quality of our performer's act. We are ready to offer each table a complimentary dish from our chef." The room filled with indignant voices again. Andres hurriedly set up the DJ console, trying to salvage the situation. Marta wanted to sink into the ground from shame and self-pity. Red circles danced before her eyes, and the lights were blinding. She didn't remember how she bolted from the restaurant hall, past the coat room, and out onto the street. The cool breeze brushed against her neck and arms, exposed by the dress. Only here, on a decorative bench a bit away from the doors and the juniper bushes, did Marta allow herself to break down in tears. She no longer cared about her makeup, dress, or appearance. She had disgraced herself and the restaurant because of her stupid fear, and she might have already lost her job. Footsteps approached, and someone stopped beside the bench, a lighter flicked. "Why are you crying, beautiful?" came an unpleasantly familiar voice from above. Marta's shoulders, trembling from crying, froze. She hoped she was mistaken. Not him. Not now. "Are you deaf, my joy?" the voice repeated, less friendly this time. Marta remained still, pressing her hands to her face. The cool wind pricked her skin unpleasantly. She wanted to sink into the ground again, but this time in search of shelter and protection. "Got it," the voice drawled, "you've bitten your tongue. Well, I'm not a big fan of such women, but they have their charm and advantages. They don't argue, they don't resist. Right, beautiful? Why are we standing here, freezing? Let's go to the sauna and warm up." A cold hand gripped Marta's shoulder. She jerked away instantly, shaking it off, and saw the grinning cazador. "Stop playing hard to get, darling," he said, pushing Marta toward the fence. "I asked nicely, offered flowers, but you act like a princess. This isn't right, that isn't right. Do you think you're a star or something? Touch me and I'll scream." She backed toward the bushes and the fence. A few more steps and she'd be trapped. The only way out was through the bushes to the parking lot, but in a long dress, it was impossible. "Scream all you want," Cazador generously allowed, stubbing out his cigarette on the bench's trash bin. "It's a restaurant. It's always lively here on Saturdays. No one will care about your screams." Marta hesitated and missed the moment when Tobias grabbed her arm, covered her mouth, and roughly dragged her to the car like a sack of potatoes. In the restaurant window, Marta noticed Teodora. The woman was watching the scene at the entrance with interest and then mockingly raised her glass when she saw the horror in the disgraced singer's eyes. Marta struggled desperately as Cazador dragged her to the parking lot. When he opened the back door and started shoving her inside, she managed to bite his finger hard enough to draw blood. Almost immediately, her cheek was stung by a slap. Her head buzzed. "You little witch!" Tobias groaned in pain. "Well, it doesn't matter. With or without bruises, you're coming with me tonight." "Help!" Marta screamed desperately with the last of her strength, but her voice was drowned out by the music playing from the restaurant. The car door slammed shut and immediately locked. Marta frantically tried to pull the handle of the other door, but it too was unresponsive to her pleas. A second passed, 2, 3. The terrible anticipation hung in the air. Suddenly there was a commotion outside, then a thud, and someone fell next to the car like a pile of logs. "Are you alive?" The door opened after a short beep from the alarm. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Miguel was looking at Marta. He helped her out of the car. Marta was shaking. She instinctively hugged the mayor with her cold hands. Someone kindly draped a warm jacket over her shoulders. I'm so sorry," Marta sobbed and babbled incoherently, "for what I said to you in the car at the house. That woman, she threatened me that my mom would die. She's there now, in the restaurant. If I had known. And you saved me a second time. I'm sorry." Miguel leaned down and gently stroked her head, then glanced down. "Frisco, call the police," Miguel ordered. "This sauna enthusiast is going on a holiday for attempted kidnapping." Marta saw Cazador lying unconscious on the asphalt next to the driver's door. The familiar mustached man was shaking his right hand, clenching and unclenching his fingers. "Miguel, we'll call. The patrol will be here quickly," the driver responded, "but there's something else interesting." Frisco didn't have time to finish. Teodora, who had seen everything from the window, walked out of the restaurant doors. The sound of her high heels painfully pierced the ears. Marta, in horror, clung even closer to Miguel, whispering, "It's her. Dear husband, what a surprise," she greeted her spouse loudly, spreading her arms wide, "and you said you couldn't come. What's the matter? Did your plans change, or did you finally decide to grace your wife with your presence for the evening?" Miguel remained silent, but Teodora was not going to keep quiet. "I see you've decided to work your way through the entire family of these unfortunate people. First the mother, now the young daughter. Disgusting, Miguel, doesn't it sicken you?" Teodora wrinkled her nose in disgust. "At least wash your hands after them." Marta felt the man tense up, but restrained himself from responding to this rather painful jab. Frisco, who was standing nearby, cautiously extracted an envelope from behind his back. "Miguel, I think you should take a look at this." He handed the envelope to his boss under Teodora's watchful gaze. "And what's this? A bribe?" the woman suggested sarcastically. Marta released the mayor and stepped back, allowing him to examine the contents of the envelope. Inside were several photos, clearly taken at different times, but each showed Teodora in or near a car with Cazador. They were either hugging or kissing. "And you still dare to say anything to me?" Miguel asked Teodora in a terrifyingly calm voice, carefully rolling the photos into a tube between his fingers. Teodora finally realized what was in the envelope. Her face contorted. Her eyes darted frantically, stopping on her lover behind the group, then on Marta, then on the photos in her husband's hands. "You deceitful witch, madam," Frisco commented curtly, addressing Teodora. "What?" she shrieked hysterically. "Miguel, control your chauffeur. He has no right to talk to me like that." "I won't even consider it," replied Miguel. In powerless, shamed rage, Teodora threw the remaining champagne from her glass into his face. Marta noticed how Frisco drew 2 lines in the air with his fingers afterward, seemingly forming a cross, presumably on Teodora. Miguel silently took a handkerchief from his jacket pocket, wiped his face in one motion, then carefully shook it out and put it back. "My pleasure," he said, slipping the photos into Teodora's empty glass with 2 fingers, then turned to Frisco. "Now call the police, Frisco." Marta, already sitting in the mayor's car, saw the police arrive, saw them questioning Miguel and Frisco, saw Amir waving his arms and trying to explain something, saw Teodora hastily leave in a taxi, and saw the guests quickly dispersing. Then everything blurred into a mess and dissolved into sleep. The clinic sparkled with white corridors and friendly nurses. Marta looked around while waiting for her mother by the oncologist's office. Used to provincial rundown clinics, the girl was surprised by the cleanliness, modernity, and lack of queues in the capital's medical center. Life had changed in an amazing way over the past 2 months for everyone. Miguel kept his promise and arranged for Medina to see and be treated by a familiar doctor, though he himself was at the center of a scandal. His presence at the restaurant that night did not go unnoticed, and omnipresent paparazzi quickly snapped sensational pictures. The next day, all the regional news outlets were filled with provocative headlines and photos of the mayor's wife throwing champagne in his face. The yellow press dragged in the police, and Marta, and God knows what else. Later, they released a retraction, but the scandal was already gaining momentum. Miguel was asked to step down early from his post as mayor. Shortly thereafter, an obscure yellow rag acquired those same photos from the envelope and sparked a new wave of the scandal. Teodora was furious and practically destroyed the editorial office, using her influence, but it was too late. The entire city followed the loud divorce of its former mayor, savoring and discussing it on every corner. Cazador desperately denied the charges against him, but the restaurant's surveillance cameras left him no chance. Tobias Teo was sent to the city's detention center until a court date was set. Tobias hoped that Teodora would help him get off the hook, but she had already forgotten about her wayward lover. Miguel was moved to a regional ministerial position and was left alone for the time being. Naturally, the man wasn't going to sit idle in his new position, but he waited for the uproar to die down. How Miguel ended up at the restaurant that fateful evening was thanks to maternal intuition. Medina sensed something was wrong during the day. She called her daughter, but in the chaos and abundance of guests, Marta had no time for the phone. She only remembered her belongings when Frisco brought her home and carefully took everything out of the trunk. Failing to reach her daughter, Medina dialed Miguel's number. He listened to the woman without question and replied, "We're leaving, dropping everything." Medina's premonitions were correct. Approaching the restaurant, he saw Marta being pushed into a car by a familiar giant with a scar. Frisco quickly reacted and, remembering his military training, punched Cazador in the jaw so hard that he fell to his knees and passed out. After what happened, it was obvious that Marta would not return to work for Amir. Miguel suggested she open a singing school for children. Marta gladly agreed, and the venture took off. Now she didn't have to strain herself in a noisy hall and could earn comfortably in a pleasant environment. Often, Marta would wear her mother's dress to classes, considering it lucky. After all, it was with that outfit that this whole complicated story began. On rare free evenings, Miguel would visit Medina and Marta, and during those times, everyone would forget about their burdens and problems as they received what their hearts had longed for. Marta enjoyed these evenings. She felt as if she had found a father again. Sometimes, though, the girl felt like a third wheel and would then leave her mom and Miguel alone. In such moments, he always held her hand, as if still asking for forgiveness for what had happened so long ago. Medina gave Miguel a handkerchief embroidered with cornflowers, and since then he always carried the gift with him, considering it a talisman. The doors of the doctor's office opened. From behind them came her mother's voice, expressing gratitude, and soon she herself appeared in the corridor, smiling broadly. "Well, what did they say?" Marta jumped up from the couch in anticipation. "The doctor scheduled the surgery date. The prognosis is good. The metastases are not progressing," Medina informed her. "There's a chance to completely beat the disease. Do you understand?" Instead of answering, Marta jumped for joy and hugged her mother tightly. "This is just a miracle," she exclaimed happily. Indeed, Medina stroked her hair. "It's a miracle that I have you, daughter, and everything else is just the pros of life." "Mom, don't say that," Marta protested. "Let's go for a walk in Plaza Mayor. It must be beautiful there now." "There's snow, the fair is open," Medina suggested, dreamily looking out the window at the swirling snowflakes. "We can drink hot cocoa with churros." Marta laughed, took her mother by the hand, and together they set off on this small, frosty, winter adventure.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.